Hello and welcome to the Blood-like Rivers set review for Revolution Custom Standard. I am Dr. Chillbrain, and joining me today is All Who Wander.
Hi, thanks for having me, Chill.
Ruben.
Really looking forward to this.
And Scribble.
Hey, that's me.
We are four of the curators for the Revolution Custom Standard format, and Blood-like Rivers is the new set that's rotating in. It's got a lot of very exciting tools, and when we say a lot, we mean a lot. This is in no way going to be an exhaustive set review. There are too many exciting cards to talk about, but we wanted to go ahead and make this video about some of the cards that we think are going to have the biggest impact on the format, or we think are just interesting to talk about, the kind of decks they'll go in, the kind of decks they'll create, and that maybe how they'll support some other archetypes that already exist in the format, and try and figure out maybe what the format's going to look like once the set rotates in. Before that, though, we do want to go over the mechanics really fast. The first mechanic that we want to talk about is Ancient. You can see it right here on Succumb to History. Ancient is like a state you can be in, basically, where you're ancient as long as you have 8 or more total land cards in play or in your graveyard. So kind of incentivizing you to both play the long game, but also fill your graveyard or ramp. There's a lot of different decks that can enable Ancient in different ways, which is pretty interesting. The other new mechanic here is, we'll go up to the top here, is Multitude. You can see it here on Drift Off. Basically, it's Replicate, but it's just a flat cost, and you get one copy. But it ends up being on a lot of permanents, and there's a lot of interesting applications of it in the set. Pretty simple, but gives your spells a little bit more utility in the late game. As far as returning mechanics, you also have Escape, as seen here on Flesh Offered to the Dead. Most of the cards do have normal exiling other cards from your graveyard as the escape conditions, but there are some other escape clauses that we'll see as we go through the set. Revolt also returns. You can see it here on Revolutionary Recruiter. If a permanent you control leaves the battlefield this turn, you get some extra effects. There's a lot of different things that can synergize with that. You can see here Recruiter can let you sacrifice lands to enable it. There's a lot of other enablers and payoffs for Revolt we'll see later. And also Surveil in the Grand Revolution tradition is also in the set. It's Scry for the Graveyard. And I guess with that, we're going to get started here with our first card here, Approaching Greatness. It's 1 and a white for a sorcery. You search your library for an enchantment card with mana value 5 or greater, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle. And you gain 5 life.
Yeah, so the gain 5 life here is pretty huge, and I'm definitely going to be trying to play this a little bit. Search up my Timmy Dream kind of enchantments, and there's actually like a good amount both in this set and kind of in the format in general of like big enchantments that we could tutor up. But
Yeah.
the stability it gives you is excellent.
The format has a lot of tools with this. We've got Karsus has rifts, we've got Karslav has campaigns, Sagas in Spurgard. So there's a lot of enchantment support already, and this I think can really be the icing on the cake to make that enchantment matters deck sort of see play.
The biggest thing about me for this card is most of the time when you're building
And the
around
wonderful
these
thing about
big, clunky, expensive cards, the hardest thing is you're just going to get run over by aggro, but Approaching Greatness just gives you 5 life is a pretty huge cushion, as anyone who's played against Thragtusk can tell you. So it's going to really help you live to the long game to actually do your goofy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to depend on kind of like what style of aggro we see. Like, if we're going to see like types of aggro decks that's kind of a bit more snowbally, this might not end up fighting, a major home. But if the aggro decks are just trying to, get you to exactly 20 damage as quickly as possible, this could, still have game against that.
Yeah, and letting your enchantment matter deck only play like a handful of 5 mana cost enchantments and then a play set of these, and then your entire rest of your deck can be just cheap interaction enchantments, that sort of thing. Like that gives it a completely different angle of attack against those aggro decks.
Yeah.
Another thing about this card,
and there are even some enchantments. There are even some enchantments, things like Realm's Rebirth, which are otherwise far too expensive to play normally, but are a nice kind of toolboxy piece almost that you can get with this if you need the reach and the game goes long enough, that sort of thing.
For sure. I think that's all we really wanted to say about this one. But yeah, I think
overall, I don't think this is going to be, like defining the format, but I think it's going to be a really nice tool for those who want to play the style of deck.
I think it's going to be a pretty popular card too. People love their big goofy enchantments.
Indeed.
All right, next up, speaking of enchantments, we've got Drift Off. It's 1 white for an enchantment. It's got Multitude for 6 mana. When you cast it for that, you can copy it, and it's a banishing light essentially.
Yeah, I love what banishing lights do to the format a lot. Like, the kind of subtle interactions you can have, and potential kind of reversals of fortune that's blowing up a banishing light at the right time can do. And then the fact that you can late game just double it is pretty exciting. Especially because this is like a 3 mana banishing light, not 4 mana. Makes it pretty, makes it pretty efficient.
Yeah,
this is what takes me off Contain the Monstrous.
Yeah.
No.
Not much to add here. This is a great card on 3 mana. It's also a great card on 6 mana, and I'm happy to draw it at any point in the game where I have at least 3 mana. So yeah,
for sure, definitely.
I think it being another strong call tool in an enchantment deck, and curving like right after approaching greatness means you can offer some permanent stability after doing your tutoring on turn 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely going to make look at what's type of like main deck, either like sideboardable like mass enchantment removal there is in the format. It's going to be important, because if you can blow up both drift offs at once, you can really basically swing the entire game back towards you.
Yeah, just a solid little piece to have in the format. I think a lot of slower decks are going to make great use of it, especially. Next up, we got Flesh Offered to the Dead. 2 and a white for a sorcery. You make 2 1/1 spirits tokens with flying, and it's got escape for 2 white/black. Exile 4 other cards from your graveyard. Fans of Innistrad Block will probably recognize this as a Lingering Souls variant.
Except this one actually lingers in your graveyard.
I mean, what's not to love about Lingering Souls? Right, yeah, this one lingers quite a bit longer. I like this card sort of in... Sorry. I like this card in sort of...
All right, one more time here. You can go.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say...
Okay, I like this card in sort of...
Not even going to say anything.
I'm going to shut up now. You go ahead. Okay, I'm going to talk now. Okay. I really like this card in sort of aristocrats-like decks. It provides 2 nice bodies that can attack, and you can reuse it potentially over and over again in those sorts of deck. But any kind of just reasonable mid-range deck that wants 2 flyers is happy to play this as sort of late-game reach, because if the game goes long enough, you'll want something to escape, and this does a pretty reasonable job for a pretty reasonable rate.
I'll be honest, I'm a little less convinced about this because of the extra mana cost in the escape and the fact that you need 8 other cards in your graveyard in order to cast this twice and like really make it better than Lingering Souls. But I guess it's also a fair point that you don't really need Lingering Souls to be any better for it to be good, and this still does a great Lingering Souls impression. I'm not convinced it'll be great as just like a general mid-range tool. I think you'll need to have a specific reason to want it, like... there's some cards in here that I'll care about the spirit subtype specifically. You'll see a Reliquary Haunt under there, and there's more later on. I think those decks will definitely love this card, but I think it's a little more niche than something like Lingering Souls, where it's just a great tool for any white-black mid-rangey deck.
Yeah, it offers an interesting texture alongside Coalesce, where because we've got a bunch of sets now with graveyard cast matters, there's a bunch of support for it, but at the same time you don't want to run too many of those because they eat away at each other's resources.
For sure.
Indeed. And I mean, the other option other than mid-range decks is potentially some sort of like black-white or Esper control deck, just running 1 or 2 of these as basically a backup finisher. But yeah, I also am a little lower on this, but I think it's really nice texture, and going to potentially find small home somewhere.
That's good on that. Next up, continuing our train of enchantments. There's not too many in this set, but the hits it has are great. We have Immaculate Mandate, 2 white for a sorcery. Choose artifact or enchantment. Return all non-creature cards of the chosen type from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this is the second coming of Replenish, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, this is 5 mana, and it returns multiple. And basically, if you're ever returning more than like 2 things, this is kind of absurd value.
For sure.
Um,
Notably, we do already have a living end or a living death for enchantments in the format. It was in Karsus, which this would kind of play a similar role to, but the fact that it doesn't ditch what you already have on the field, it just adds to it, is pretty nice, but it's heavier on color requirements and it's 1 more mana. I think the decision whether to play that or this card is an interesting one, but I think I would generally tend towards this, especially depending on the enchantments that you have. But both cards are great with things like Rifts, things like Sagas, especially Rifts, all the little cheap ones like Dooming Door that just give you little advantage and then you can bring back all at once.
Yeah, I also want to just like keep an eye on this card if we have Artifacts Matters sets
For sure.
enter
Don't
the format.
forget that this card can recur artifacts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I think that's good for that. We got Lichbane Captain next. White for a 2/2 soldier. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1. Just a bread and butter lord here. But we do have some pretty powerful soldiers in the format.
Yeah, this will perform pretty nicely, I think, alongside Viridian's last mission.
Yeah, Viridian herself is a soldier. There's several other powerful soldiers from that set. There's also a couple of these Lichbane flavored cards from this set that are fairly powerful soldiers. There's a Multitude 3/1 that's pretty strong. I think that this will be an interesting route for an aggro deck to potentially take.
Yeah. And Karslov also had a number of soldiers that had added to the
definitely.
format, which...
Oh, and monocolor matters, so the double pip here might actually not be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, I think the triple white rare from Karslov is a soldier as well. So
that's a great curve right there.
I mean, also just some of the like most played white cards, like Justicar, Overseer, etc., are also just happen to be soldiers.
Yeah, Justiciar Overseer, very potent with this card.
And Queen
Mandarli as well.
Yeah,
I definitely want to try out this soldier deck. I think it has potential to not sacrifice very much card quality at all over just like a standard white weenie-ish deck, and just be able to just pack your deck with really strong soldiers, and then incidentally have like 1 or 2 tribal payoffs that really push you over the edge, and this being one of them.
Indeed.
Speaking of tribal, we have Reliquary Haunt. It's a 1-mana 1/1 flyer. Whenever another spirit enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Reliquary Haunt. So it's a champion of the parish for spirits, and it's got flying.
Yeah, the flying is really what kind of puts us over the edge. Because you can like slap this down pretty early, and unlike Champion of the Parish, if you don't have an immediate follow up, it doesn't get chump blocked. And then so many cards make multiple spirits. Flesh offered to the dead, being a prime example. But I'm not sure we quite have the density.
Yeah, there's not very many spirits in the format outside of this set, or will be after rotation. Ironically, Kutalia has quite a few.
Yeah.
I think BLR actually offers a lot of tools for this deck, though, because going through the set, a lot of the stuff in white and blue, like there's just a lot of good spirit stuff coming together that I don't think this set really needs a ton of extra support from other sets for a deck like this to pop off.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, the Bloodlight Rivers will be in the format for several other rotations, and Spirit is a very common subtype to either support or include in your set. So we're looking forward to seeing how it comes together with other sets in the future.
Yep.
Interesting to see how the Spirits deck pans out. Revolutionary Recruiter is next. We got a Goblin Trenches on a creature. It's 2 and a white for a human soldier, 2/2. 2 and sacrifice a land to make 2 1/1 soldier tokens. And whenever it attacks, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, other creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn.
It's Revolutionary Heralds.
Revolutionary Herald Goblin Trenches. Together at last.
I like this card. I'm not sure like how often you're gonna get the kind of how many times you're gonna kind of sacrifice your lands early on. It's a really big cost.
Yeah.
But then like early on, it's also really hard to kind of trigger Revolt at the right time. So yeah, I think this really needs to find exactly the right shell, but in that shell it will be very good.
The thing about Goblin Trenches is even if you're not using it all the time, when you do use it, it gives you so much value. Because 2 tokens is a lot, especially if you have ways to buff them. Like, they are soldier tokens, so they get buffed by the Lichbane Captain if you want to take that route. Another thing to consider is there's a sort of Life from the Loam type card in green that lets you recur lands back to your hand, which has pretty great synergy with this card as kind of a green-white little Loam engine there. And it enabling its own Revolt is also very nice. I think this card
A lot of strong.
is far from ubiquitous, but it's got its uses.
Yeah, it's just really fragile.
Adding on to that green synergy there's a lot of good green-white token stuff in this set, which the Recruiter also makes tokens, so that could come together.
Yeah, just how to enable it consistently if you're not using the sacrifice a land element.
I think the Revolt tech will be quite an interesting texture because obviously we have less Revolt enablers than other sets or other formats that have Revolt. But at the same time, a lot of the Revolt cards themselves seem a bit stronger to compensate here than a lot of the other ones that we've seen in Standard or in Canon Magic. And
we do have a pretty strong Evolving Wilds kind of variant that we'll get to soon. So it's not like we have no quote unquote free ways to enable it.
And we've also had, as I sort of alluded to earlier, at various times in the format, aristocrat stacks, which can kind of very easily control when Revolt is on. And cards like this might be interesting for that deck, although I don't know how frequently they want to throw their lands away for a couple more friends. But very skill testing card, very fun, interested to see how it plays.
Definitely. Next up, we've got Vengeful Whisper. It's 3 white for a 4/4 flying lifelink spirit. When it dies, you make an enchantment token named Memorial with. At the beginning of your upkeep, you make a 1/1 white spirit token with flying. Pipsqueak says you wanted just a really cool control finisher for this slot, and I think this does do an interesting job of being that.
Yeah, I mean, the lifelink here is huge.
Definitely.
So, this is, probably a fair bit smaller than a lot of the other kind of, mid-range or control kind of 5-drops that you could be playing. But, the kind of endless value and the lifelink are a really potent combination. I guess going to come down to a lot to kind of what type of removal people are playing. If everyone's playing O-rings, this becomes a lot less effective.
Yeah, pretty weak against no respite, but otherwise, the fact that this is it's a Baneslayer that your opponent feels bad about casting Doomblade on, which is a pretty good place to be.
I feel like if Lyra can be a dominant force against aggro in its Standard, then I feel like this, as one that doesn't die to removal, is probably also gets there. There's also a card in the set, a 1-mana white card that it's a modal spell where either you can make a 1/1 spirit or you can make a token that's a copy of a token you control. And using that to make a spirit early game, but then having the option to copy this enchantment for an extra spirit every turn late game seems pretty sweet.
Maybe a little Windmori, but definitely pretty cute. I mean, maybe that's a good package for the Spirits deck with the Reliquary Haunt, though, because the spell does make a spirit. Yeah, neat card.
Solid card. I'm interested. Definitely something I'll enjoy playing if the format turns out the right way.
Yeah. And next up, we've got our last white card here. Wipe the World Clean. 2 white for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures and all planeswalkers. Each opponent who controlled 2 or more permanents destroyed this way draws a card. All planeswalkers is interesting here, and I don't know if it's upside or downside. I think
in this set specifically, it is definitely an upside, and this is control player's dream for me because there's so much enchantment support. I think this is the perfect card for the enchantment stick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because often the way you beat board wipe heavy control decks is you start siding in a bunch of value planeswalkers, and this just kind of gives you a main. Yeah.
How do we think this compares to something like Dreamfall, where this is less colors than Dreamfall, and it does kill planeswalkers, but the card draw mode is pretty giving your opponent a free card is never good.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the like less colors is really, really important because like it was pretty painful to try to play like a 3-color control deck a lot of the time and still hit the wrath
Yeah.
at exactly when you needed it.
I think the Karsus enchantments matters is mostly focused in white blacks. So if you want to play that
Yeah.
rather than playing blue, then this could be a good option to have over
sure.
Dreamfall.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see the spot this card has in the format alongside other wraths that exist.
Or, just play a playset of each.
Yeah, I mean that works too. Next up, we got blue cards here. We got some more spirits with Conjure Forth, single blue for a sorcery. You'll make a 1/1 spirit token with flying, and if you cast another instant or sorcery spell this turn, you make 2 of them instead.
Yeah, this is gonna be. This is a lot of potential extra damage for like prowess style decks. A lot adding to the board so much.
Being able to play like on turn 2, play a cantrip and then this and get 2/1 flyers, that's a lot.
Well, especially if you've played like a prowess creature on 1.
Oh yeah,
which
definitely.
we'll see there are quite a few.
Lingering Souls eat your heart out. I'm just waiting for someone to curve out on me with a turn 1 Reliquary Haunt, then turn 2 either double Conjure Forth or the 1 mana white make a spirit token, then Conjure Forth, and then they just have a 4/4 or a 5/5 Reliquary Haunt on turn 2.
Woof.
And that'll help you
I
get
also
cards in your graveyard to
am
escape
really
your
a sucker
Flesh Offer to the Dead.
I think we can stop
I'm
on the
also
curve.
really a sucker for 1-drops. You don't actually want to play on turn 1. I think this is just a really good job of when to kind of play this card is sort of interesting. Do you want to just start committing damage to the board early if you don't have anything better, or do you want to try and wait and save to use this with something better? It's an interesting decision that I think will be fun.
Yeah, I mean we've seen with cards like a Granite Harbinger, like sometimes just a 1/1 flyer for 1 can get in like a good couple of damage over the course of a game, and there's no exception when you get to them.
All right. Next up, we've got Possibility Slips Away. It is a blue instant. Choose 1. If you've cast another spell this turn, choose any number instead. Target spell's owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library. Create a token that's a copy of target non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less, or return target sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand and exile Possibility Slips Away. So this is our second blue big value spell like this in the format, alongside the draw 3 card spell from Karslov. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the versatility on this makes me really think that maybe mono blue control has outs. I'm not sure if we have the fixing for a 2-colored like white blue control deck to be running both of these triple blue cards. So I'm interested to see where that goes. But even just that if you've cast another spell tag, like there's a bunch of blue stuff with that, so that maybe some kind of prowessy deck wants this as more of a tempo tool.
Yeah, just got to be careful of not like of not knowing like how important that is if like for example your opponent doesn't have a spell on the stack, right? One of the modes kind of doesn't really do anything. So this has a lot of hoops to jump through, but is obviously very powerful if it can line up exactly right.
Yeah, for sure. Continuing on our spirits train, I promise this whole set isn't spirits, but we do have Shepherd of Sleeping Dead. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/1 flying spirit. Whenever 1 or more non-token spirits you control attack, you make a token spirit with flying. The fact that this can provide immediate value the turn it comes down is pretty nice, but as we saw with Conjure Forth and the white spell, there's kind of a tension between a lot of your spirit things are going to be tokens. So how many non-token spirits can you get?
Yeah, it definitely puts an emphasis on needing to run more creatures, like actual creatures, rather than token-making spells. So there's a bit of tension, but like the tools are just growing in size.
I don't know. I don't think this one will make it just because of the density issue. We don't have spirit supports from other sets at the moment, and there's so many of the other spirits tokens. But yeah, I mean, this is a card I would keep an eye on as we add new sets to the format.
Yeah,
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Shroud in Stars is next. 1 blue mana for an instant. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature. It gains hexproof until end of turn. It's Snakeskin Veil, but blue.
Yeah, I mean, I love these types of effects, and being able to play it in, blue-white tempo or something, similar is pretty, really nice for the sideboard. But obviously, just a sideboard card.
I
mean, we've got a bunch of blue tempo, blue flash matters so far. Spurguard, Karslav both have blue flash matters, so it kind of slots right in as a tempo shell.
One thing about this card is I think it's less necessary in blue than it is in green, because in blue you do have other counter magic that you could be running instead of this, whereas in green, Snakeskin Veil was like you're out against removal. So I don't know if this will be able to find as much of a consistent home as Snakeskin Veil did, but it's definitely a good option to keep in mind, especially because it does put more stats on the board, so it's got utility beyond just like a reactive tool.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the stats are more impactful here than with green, the hexproof is the impactful part. So yeah, it plays a bit differently, even though it's exactly the same card.
Yeah, it's interesting. Silence of the Drowned, speaking of cheap counter magic, is 2 mana for an instant, 1 in a blue. Choose 1. Counter target spell unless the controller pays 2, or tap target permanent. If it's a creature, it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. It's a little bit of a quench with some marginal upside, but I think, it's got its uses.
We are losing our premier quench in bounce off with Catalia, so having a replacement come in is nice.
I mean, this is a replacement
and especially for things like tempo decks, where both of the modes for this are often extremely relevant.
Yeah, for sure. Just being able to get rid of a blocker or even just tap a land on their upkeep. It's kind of mean, but it can help.
Yeah, I mean, we saw with cards like Getting Lost in from Vastuum, like how much like a freeze at the right time can really mess people up. And so having that attached to your quench, which is like you're already nearly always running a bunch of these in any type of cheap blue deck, is I think this will be a format staple, and both modes will see a bunch of play.
Yeah,
I'm actually really interested in playing this in a Battle Trance deck because you want a lot of instants in that deck so that you can cast them during combat, but you don't really want to run counter spells alongside that card because of how restrictive they are when you can cast them. You can't really cast them when you have an attacking creature, but you want a lot of instant speed interaction, and this gives you the option of casting it off the top of your library just for the second mode.
Does that work how you want? Yeah, does that work how you want it to with you can tap them down before they go to blockers? I guess.
As long as you go to an attack.
Yep.
Yeah, as long as you control an attacking
And
creature.
declare attack.
Yeah. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty much a staple, as others have said. We got Twin Cast Disciple here is our last mono blue card. It's 1 mana for a 1/1 Prowess Wizard. Whenever you copy a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Twin Cast Disciple. I don't know how often that second mode's going to matter, but this is a 1 mana Prowess creature.
Yeah, I agree. 1 mana prowess creature, and I think there are a couple of small tools that might let us copy some spells. I'm trying to remember an example. But even without that ability, it's just a 1 mana 1/1 with prowess, which is great for sort of the blue focused tempo decks. Not much else to say.
Yeah, I think this will be a density thing, right? Of like,
for sure, never your first choice, but.
Indeed. And yeah, it doesn't look like we have really many cheap ways of creating copies. Just looking at a quick look through the format, at least not in the other sets in the format.
Yeah, that's gonna do it for blue. We're gonna move on to black, and there's a lot of spicy black cards here. Starting out with Arquette Scheming. This is 3 black for an enchantment. At the beginning of upkeep, you draw a card and lose a life. You may repeat this process up to 2 times. Pipsqueak said she designed this card to be Yawgmoth's Bargain for control decks.
Yeah, I mean the control, like the fact that you like can get a huge burst of cards immediately when you want it, but you can also kind of just use this as a over expensive Phyrexian arena. Not be forced to kind of say draw free and lose free life every turn. Certainly is interesting. I'm not sure this is gonna. I don't know. This feels more like an EDH card, but we'll see. It depends on the speed of the format.
I had my doubts about this one because it is quite slow, but I think something that really pushes over the edge is approaching greatness. Like that 5 life buffer, and meaning that you only need to run one of these to have reliable access to it with approaching greatness.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The card this reminds me of is Future Sight, actually, where it's a big 5-mana enchantment. It kind of doesn't do anything the turn it comes down, but if you get to untap with it, it's a lot of card advantage. And the life is definitely going to be relevant. You shouldn't ignore that, but I think this card is... If there's a shell for it, and I think with Approaching Greatness there very, very well might be, I think this card could be pretty backbreaking if you get to untap with it and you're in a good position. I think you'll be doing quite well that game.
Yep.
Dabbling Dangerously is next. We got 2 black for an instant. Search your library for a non-black card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Create a treasure token.
Yeah, so the create a treasure token. Also, this is an instant. I think is really important.
Definitely.
Like, if this was a sorcery, it's like I would still be looking at this, but it's like a lot clunkier. But like, you just play this in like control deck, in like reactive control decks, right? And especially like Esper ones or something, and you can just be like, okay, either it's really late game and I can search up the exact thing I want and like play it in response immediately with the treasure helping you cast it, because this can always get like a 1 cost card and play it immediately. Or you can if you hold up counter magic or something and they don't do anything, you play it as a backup and get yourself like some sort of late game win con. This card is really flexible.
We're losing Thin the Veil with rotation, and while I don't think this card will be quite as ubiquitous as Thin the Veil, I think it's definitely going to fill a similar role in slower decks.
Yeah. I mean, Thin the Veil...
I think it leans toward a little bit towards Thin the Veil lent itself more towards proactive strategies, while I feel this will lend itself more towards reactive strategies. And part of that is just the instant versus sorcery speed. Also, the sort of rewarding you for playing multiple colors means that it probably won't go into sort of the largely mono black sort of mid-range decks that have been kind of seeing play. So I think they will end up playing probably pretty differently, but that's not to say this card won't be good.
I don't know if I agree with that this card doesn't have proactive uses, because the fact that you can hold up like removal or something, and then end of turn 4 play this, search up a 2-drop, and then on turn 5, or a 6-drop rather, and then on turn 5 use the treasure to cast a 6-drop. Like I think this card could have use using the treasure as like straight up ramp, and just being able to at the end of turn cast this. And
I mean, what do you think of like some sort of like green black ramp? Or, and potentially you could put Reanimator themes in it if you want.
Like the rock type deck, to use a Can Lantern analogy. I think this card has a lot of interesting applications for sure.
Yeah, you can't look up for a card that is multicolored, like black and another color, which definitely like stymies its usage a bit there. So you have to really be heavy in the other colors to have a lot of tutor targets.
Yeah, or be playing like a 3-4 color deck that's has a good enough mana base to kind of support this. But then this is also double black, so yeah, I mean it's obviously powerful, and obviously has a lot of interesting homes. I'm gonna personally kind of try it out in reactive control decks to start with, but I think it could find other places.
All right. Next up here we have Cull of the Crypt, 2 and a black for an enchantment. For 1 black mana, you exile 2 target cards from graveyards. If they share a card type, you draw a card and you lose 1 life.
Yep, notably this can hit your opponent's graveyard, so it's very powerful graveyard hate, which I believe the format will need, but it is also a value engine at the same time.
And you can also exile one from yours and one for your opponents if you need that to match the card types, which a lot of cards like this don't let you do.
For sure.
Yeah, I think if you're playing a deck that has like a bunch of escape tools and that sort of thing where you're exiling your own graveyard already, then it might be more of a sideboard card that you bring in for the graveyard hate matchups or against like control where you really want to grind out. But if you're not running those in your main deck, then you can honestly afford to run this in your main and then use your own graveyard as well for resources.
Does the free cost, like, I don't know, I'm not super excited about this as a sideboard card though, because like it is somewhat expensive, so it need to be both
I can
like,
especially see.
it need to be both like my opponent is playing lots of graveyard stuff and it's a slow matchup, which is pretty narrow.
The home I like this best in is something like reactive control, where you're playing largely at instant speed, and you can because you'll have a lot of instants, you'll have a lot of ability to decide when you want to draw cards and the ability to do so from your own graveyard. But you'll also be putting things into your opponent's graveyard pretty regularly, and so this is a nice sort of card advantage, and it lets you sculpt your hand and control your life total as a way of achieving the end game you want.
True, and it is a lot of card advantage if there's enough cards in the graveyard. Like this doesn't have a once per turn. This doesn't have like a once per turn activation or anything like this. You can just be like, okay, black draw a card, black draw a card, black draw a card. Like that's it is powerful, certainly if you have the time to get it down and the resources to fuel it.
And if you need to use it as graveyard hate and you want to maintain your life total, you can always exile 2 cards with different types.
Yep. Lots of options there. Next up, we have leaning more towards the aggressive side, we have the Fleshless Assailant. It's a 1 and a black for a 3/1 skeleton knight. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard or a creature enters the battlefield under your control from a graveyard, you return it from your graveyard to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step.
Yeah, the fact that this comes back for free means if you ever get like multiples of this in your graveyards, it's kind of terrifying. Potentially, some sort of like graveyard aristocrats style deck. If you can sacrifice these, bring something back, get them all back, then sacrifice them again, repeat, like kind of spooky. But free 1 for 2 is fine as a starting point. And it just depends on how often we can bring this back, how consistently.
Yeah. There's a good handful of different recursive 1-drops in the format, though some of them don't work as well with this. But I think being able to do like something like Unkillable Henchman turn 1 and then Fleshless Assailant turn 2, that's a lot of power on the board and they synergize with each other. I think this could have legs.
And notably it works with escape cards.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm excited for this with Half-Cut's Claim as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. While we're on the topic of black aggro, there was one card that we wanted
to
I
think this could
I think we wanted to add in...
Reinstated Reaper. Here we go. It is black for
this card.
Yeah, black for a 2/1 demon with menace. Whenever an opponent loses life for the first time each turn, put a 1/1 counter on Reinstated Reaper. If you're ancient, put 2 counters on it instead. And as a reminder, you're ancient as long as you have 8 or more total lands in play and in your graveyard.
Yeah, I think you kind of just ignore the ancient text and you just murder them.
Yeah, I mean it'll come up. But
there have certainly been black mid-range decks that have been ranged from aggressive to more controlling in the life of the format. We've had them even this kind of rotation. I think if there is a black mid-range deck that is even remotely aggressive, it will probably play this card. And if not, it's only because it either is the wrong speed or it got crowded out by other options that are situationally better.
Picture this.
Yeah.
Turn 1 diabolical minion, turn 2 this.
Yeah.
No.
You had me at turn 1 diabolical minion, honestly.
But yeah, this gets out of hand really quickly. It's like, this is one of the reasons to kind of be a more aggressive mono black deck at the moment. Very spicy.
Also, a 2-mana 2/1 menace is very close to unblockable, at least in the early stages of the game.
Oh yeah.
And that'll help enable itself.
It's very easy to self-enable, at least for the first couple counters. Yeah.
All right, that'll bring us back to our review page here for our next black card, Reapers Called to Harvest. 1 and a black for sorcery. Exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. You make a 2/2 black zombie token. But if you're ancient, you make a 5/5 demon token instead.
Yeah, this is fine.
It's a sideboard card, but being able to get a 5/5 off of this is pretty huge.
I mean,
I'm not sure it's just a sideboard card. Like, I don't know.
One, right? So you can cast this turn 2 with no targets.
Yeah, but I think like a lot of people will be interested in playing graveyard-centric decks when BLR comes in. So I think this has the potential, like it has a high enough floor and definitely a high enough ceiling, so that you could consider playing this in your main deck. I don't know. I'm very big on incidental graveyard hate in the main deck, so this is something that really interests me.
Yeah, I could definitely see it.
Yeah, this is it's a bear at worst in black that requires little investment, and if you're in a deck that self-mills a lot, like, for example, with Rot Begets Rot, which we'll talk about in just a second, I can see this easily being a mainboard playable card that can be a nice finisher.
All right.
That's just sweet design.
It is. And I suppose that's a good cue to move on to Rot Begets Rot. It is a 5 and a black for a sorcery. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each land card in your graveyard. Destroy target creature, its controller loses 2 life. I'm going to need you guys to convince me on this one because I'm fairly low on this card.
If more fetch lands get added to the format, this card gets real nuts real quick.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I think it's fine.
You need 3 lands in your graveyard for it to even be 3 mana. And even 3 mana for this effect is kind of underwhelming.
Well, also, it's sorcery speed.
Yeah.
No, I don't think this finds a home unless we have some major mill themes. So it's like...
Yeah, I think that if there's a dedicated self-mill deck, then this can see play in that, but I just don't think the pieces are there right now. Yeah. I think power level-wise, it absolutely could be there, but I just don't think it has the support right now it needs to shine.
Yeah. I think Succumb to History is going to just outshine this every time.
I think another card that might outshine this that we didn't have on here, but I want to add, is Midnight Ambush. Where is it? It's Ambush something. Right?
Twilight
Ambush. Thank you. Here it is.
Twilight Ambush. One time of night.
This is 1 mana for an instant. Destroy target creature with power or toughness 2 or less. So it's kind of a side grade to Disfigure here, but I think this card it's got a lot of targets in the format right now. There's a lot of 2/3s running around that this can answer, stuff like Smirk, stuff like Half Heart. This is a very clean answer to those kinds of cards.
Yeah.
I'm generally a little bit lower on Disfigures than most just because of the sort of situational nature of them. And this has the disadvantage of Disfigure that you can't use it in combat advantageously. So I'm a little bit lower on this than most people, but at the same time, it's 1 mana instant speed removal that deals with a number of aggressive threats. So if the format leans aggressive, this is probably, with relatively small creatures, of course, this is probably a pretty good tool.
A card this kind of reminds me of is the new card Cut Down from Dominaria United. There's been a lot of talk about this card where if you compare it to something like...
Oh, the total toughness 5 or less?
Yeah, this similarly to Cut Down, this does kill something like a 1/4, which is... fairly uncommon for 1 mana interaction to do, but this does. This actually hits a lot of things that Cut Down misses, like 4/2s. I think Twilight Ambush will end up seeing a lot of play.
Yeah, and we want to talk about Succumb to History.
We'll talk about that while we're on the topic of removal spells here. It's 1 and a black for an instant. Exile target creature if it has power 3 or less, or you are ancient.
Yeah, this is like the exile here. I think is really big. There's a lot of recursive stuff coming in, and I think by the time your opponent has lots of really important power or more creatures, that you are more likely to be ancient
for sure.
So. And just instant speed as well. I think this is probably the first kind of
true staple.
Big removal spell.
Exile is so huge. Smother has come a long way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and the 2 modes really feed into each other.
And the bump from 2 power to 3 power is, that too.
Yeah, it's like early game when
And
you're
the
not
rump
ancient.
trenches
Most
is-
of your targets have power 3 or less anyway, and by the time you want to be hitting things with greater power than that, that's when you're ancient.
100%.
All right. Last black card here, we have Stygian Mandate. 3 black, black, black for a sorcery. You draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. Creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand.
Yeah.
Plague Wind.
So, I mean, this is exactly the type of card I love. I love big 6 mana sweepers with like value added to them, and this is like
3 cards is a lot of cards.
It's so many cards, and like -3 at its worst. But honestly, in most control decks, this is going to be like -6, like a lot of the time, or -5, -5. Like this is going to kill everything. It's going to draw you 3 cards. Like this is the type of thing that might push out something like arquette scheming, because you don't need the scheming
like,
because you just have
why would I
it
use
attached
this?
to your board.
I'll just use it.
Yeah.
Especially because they both tax your life total.
Yes, exactly. So you got to be careful. But like, this, this is only going to come up if the format is slow enough, right? If the format ends up blisteringly fast, this is obviously, pretty sad. But
at the same time, I think we could see some kind of black-green control deck with Explore and the other green ramp tools to get this out like turn 5 or even turn 4.
Yeah.
Even the treasure from Dabbling Danger.
Yeah,
Well, yeah. Though you can't search this
true.
up.
Although you can't do
That's
this.
true.
Yeah.
Like that kind of shell with also Hugo's handiwork. Like it feels like there are a lot of tools available in black-green control deck.
Yeah, that would be definitely a deck I'd be interested in exploring.
I will mention, of course, that there's serious competition for this slot. We have both Feast of the Crows and the 3 mana board wipe Adderdoll Massacre, but those would probably be more relevant in a game where you're either using more proactive threats in the case of the Saga, or in the case of the 3 mana Wrath, where you're not really, your life total is pressured enough that you can't take turn 6 off to pay 3 life to sweep the board.
An interesting thing.
Which of those gets played will really depend on the environment, I think.
Interesting thing about this card is that it still does stuff in matchups where you don't need a Wrath. It's still a draw 3, which like in something like a Control Mirror, that's going to be pretty nice. So it's either it's really good as a Wrath or it's really good as a card draw spell.
Yeah, and it's not like control mirrors these days like have the 0 things on board, right?
Yeah.
Especially because like a lot of the time it's like, okay, I'm trying to like, get down a planeswalker and make a bunch of tokens, or like, spam out something like Flesh Offered to the Dead, that gives me value over time. And so this can clear that and reset the clock, even if it doesn't permanently get rid of the problem, while still giving you a lot of new gas.
Yeah. I think that's going to do it for our black cards. Time to move on to red. Starting off with Burning Wisdom. This is a 1-mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library, and you may play it this turn. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, exile Burning Wisdom, and you may play it during your next turn. This is a weirdo, but I think it's pretty cool.
Some kind of prowessy Bernie kit which stays really low to the ground.
Plays nice with sort of Thermo Alchemist effects or Gutter Snipe effects. It plays nice with just face burn directly. I think it does a lot of the things that prowessy decks sort of want. And generally speaking, at worst, it cantrips. And even if you can't use it again, it's just a 1-mana cantrip, which is not ideal, but I think the decks that play this will be able to use it a couple of times.
I want to cast this with Surge Protectors. That's going to feel great.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to as well with this. Or I'm looking forward to losing to that at least.
All right, moving on to our next red enchantment here, we have Altenzian Hospitality. This is 2 red for an enchantment. You can pay 1 red mana and discard a land card. It deals 3 damage to any target. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell while you are ancient, copy that spell. You can choose new targets for the copy. I love me a Double Vision. I love me a Seismic Assault. And I mean, this is just the best of both worlds.
Bombardment Zone, right? Back in
yeah. Bombardment Zone is definitely the direct inspiration for this card.
Seismic Assault that's not triple red and does extra damage and has extra upside on top of that at the late game. Like,
Yeah.
red green deck could really use this, I think.
Even
then-
Yeah,
like
the one,
a blue red
especially with
deck.
cards like Ulfarl that buy back lands into the late game. That's also true. Just
Yeah,
drawing
there's-
cards is this is good with things that get back lands or drawing cards. It's just
we're gonna
Yeah,
mention
Vegas
it down
is
here,
what-
but an unlikely piece, just an absolute killer engine with this card.
I mean, notably, just like having all your spells copied is really good, and like especially when this is probably like reasonably easy to enable the second mode on like turn 5 or 6, because this discards directly, etc. Yeah, I guess it's just you're gonna need to have the kind of card flow to actually get that many lands if you want to take advantage of that side of the effect.
Yeah.
And
Next up here we have Embrace Hopelessness. This is 1 mana for a sorcery. Discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. If you discarded 2 cards that share a type this way, you draw an additional card.
Yeah, I mean, potentially 1 mana reunion is really, really good.
Yeah, it's weird because it's
think-
not a traditional cantrip by any means, but it's got its own uses.
I think you use this like in a red-green deck that's full of lands, like maybe with Altenzian Hospitality and with the Life from the Loam in green, where you can just get those lands back into your hands. You can discard them again later. It ramps you to Ancient really quickly.
We mentioned Ulfarl earlier. That's great with this card discarding lands.
Yeah, I mean, the other option is if we have enough like Phoenixes and other recursive threats that you start just like pitching all those, so basically even more card advantage.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do with this card.
Yeah, this will be awkward a lot of the time though. Like where it's like, do I make my hand better or do I discard like a card that I want but means I get to draw an extra card? And it's like that's going to be a really rough decision a lot of the time, I think, or at least a very skill testing one.
Yeah. Next up here we have Gravefire Arcanist. This is red for a 1/1 zombie wizard with prowess. When it enters the battlefield, copy the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy. And it's got Escape for 1 red and exile 6 other cards from your graveyard.
Yeah, so I mean, this isn't really something you want to play turn 2.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a weird, like, it's a bit tricky to find a home for this potentially because, like, you have to be really reasonably like heavy red, and you need to be able to like cast another spell and then this. But then, like, yeah, it's also quite hard to recur. I don't know, if we have a lot of like 1 mana removal, like if lightning, like if shocks are really good in the format or something similar, like
I mean, we do
this
have
will
Ferocious Flame. That's a pretty good shock.
Yeah, Ferocious Flame is a hell of a card.
Notably, prowess means you can get to 4 power with this, or although it's not working off copies is lowers that dream a little bit, but
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, but also then like, yeah, it doesn't have haste, so it's not like attacking the turn from the like spell that you're immediately casting. Yeah, so it has a bit of tension to it, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I hope this card finds a home. I think it's really neat, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where this ends up settling when the format is kind of settled down. Next up here we have Incendiary Flow. It's a reprint from Eldritch Moon. It's 1 red for a sorcery. It deals 3 damage to any target. If a creature dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead. I like Volcanic Hammer and I like Incidental Graveyard Hate, so I'll play this.
Yeah, I think this is a really good safety valve to have. It's nothing too flashy, but important tool to have in the format.
Yeah, especially with all the escape running around. It's just a nice way to cleanly answer an escape creature. or any other similar death trigger or anything like that.
And if you're playing against creatureless control, then it's just a 2-mana lava spike. So has an absolute flaw.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. Hitting face is definitely, not all burn spells do that these days, especially like 2-mana sorcery. I immediately think 4 damage to creature, but this can hit face, which is pretty nice. Speaking of burn spells that can hit face, we have Slayer's Determination. It's 1 red for an instant. You choose one. Either it deals 2 damage divided as you choose, or target creature gains double strike until end of turn. I don't know if you guys have played much of One Last Stunt, but this card being a double strike spell that also has incidental value when you're not on a big combo turn, especially when it comes to killing a blocker or killing just like something that's pressuring you. I think this card could be pretty great in a One Last Stunt deck.
I mean, this card is terrifying.
Yeah, it is.
like I don't even think you need like a One Last Stunt deck or anything. Like I think you just you play this to clear, as in if X1s are really good, you play this, and if your deck is aggressive, you just play this, and then sometimes it's like, okay, I just double strike and deal like an extra 4 or 5 damage out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you just play this as removal and clear out their spirit tokens or whatever. Yeah, I don't think this will be in every deck, but I think you always be kind of afraid of it.
Oh yeah.
I wonder how crazy the line of using the first mode in a Revolt deck to kill one of your opponent's creatures and then one of your own creatures.
I mean, I don't think it'll never come up.
Yeah. I mean, also,
it's 2 situations. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, also, just the double strike can be used defensively too.
That's true.
Destroy target attacking creature, yeah.
It's 2 situationally useful cards. And at worst, you can throw it at your opponent's face. So I'm excited for this.
Our last mono red card here we have is Unrivaled Slayer. It's a reprint from Agonis Cube, actually. This is red for a 2/2 human warrior with first strike and haste. Whenever a player pays an alternate cost, it deals 3 damage to that player. It's in the Roman text, things like Multitude and Escape costs are alternate costs. Casting a spell for free is also an alternate cost. The comparison here is something like Ash Zealot, which you may remember from Return to Ravnica, was great at punishing flashback. And I think this will have a similar effect for punishing escape cards, especially. But I mean, there's just a lot of alternate costs in Magic.
Yeah. So I think the Ash Zealot. This is Ash Zealot. Ash Zealot was really good. This will be really good. The first strike is really important here, of making it really hard to interact in combat. It's a pen. It's a pen in the ass for a lot of decks, and will be a excellent sideboard card.
Red 2/2 first strike haste. I don't know. I'd mainboard that.
Yeah, I think the floor is high enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what other tools we have, but
sure.
It'll find a home.
We haven't really had a truly great red deck wins deck in this format yet. It's been a lot of red-white experience. Before that, rotated out was the go-to aggro deck, and there hasn't really been a huge presence of aggro in this most recent rotation. But I think this set definitely provides, between Unrivaled Slayer, Incendiary Flow, even Burning Wisdom if you can build around it enough. I think this set provides a lot of great, just true burn deck tools that I think will make that sort of deck much more appealing than it has been in the past of the format.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of things that kind of punish typical, pure red decks, especially Feast of the Crows, can just kind of really mess you up. But yeah, if that type of deck comes up, this will be a part of it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on to our green cards here. We have Grovelit Meditation first. The meditations are, I believe, a cycle, but this is the only one that we've have in here. It's a 1 green enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. You pay 2 mana and sacrifice it. Search your library for 2 basic land cards, reveal them. Put one into the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle. This being a ramp spell that also just keeps you alive. 4 life is not insignificant. Similar to Approaching Greatness, where it just gives you time to build up to your big stuff.
Yeah, it also lets you trigger Revolt pretty much whenever you need it. I'm not sure if the green is really focused on that, but it's an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is like you need to have the density of 1-drops in your deck to kind of make this curve out work correctly. But then that's awkward because you want to be ramping. So, yeah, I'm not sure about this one compared to other, like, we have like Explore and stuff which are doing a lot of work, but obviously those will eventually rotate out. So we'll see. Just because, like if you play this turn 2, then turn 3, are you sacking this, and then you have 1 mana left over? It's like, okay, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah. All right. Next up here, we have Leaf Shroud Hunters. This is 2 and a green for a 2/2 elemental warrior. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you can exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. Then, if there are 3 or more card types among cards exiled with the Leaf Shroud Hunter, it gets a 1/1 counter. So kind of a Scavenging Ooze type card. We do already have a 2 and a green Scavenging Ooze type card with the Drudger from VRD. How do we think this card compares to that?
I think not requiring mana is a big kid in its favor.
Yeah.
And also, you only need to target 2 cards to get the 3 or more card types. If you have something like, if there's an artifact creature or anything with 2 types, you can immediately get the counter.
I don't think that's going to come up too much, but it is good to keep in mind.
I mean, there's a reasonable amount of there's some playable artifact creatures.
Here's the gargoyle, definitely.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the main thing is just this is like 3 mana compared to 2 of like Scavenging Ooze makes it pretty rough if you're not kind of getting up to a 3/3 really quickly.
3 mana for a creature that just dies to a shock or an unkicked ferocious flame is kind of rough.
Yeah, so I'm not super high on this, but if there's a lot of graveyard targets, if graveyard removal is really important, this can be both like threat and sideboard card at the same time.
Yeah.
The card I would compare this to, and definitely I think unfavorably, is Veil Touch Soulbinder, which is rotating out. The difference here is that Leaf Shroud Hunter here is just sort of a below curve creature without getting kind of the counter. And I think that is going to make a difference. So you probably don't want to play it in sort of an aggressive deck that it just wants to get incidental value and grave hate from the trigger. That said, if there are decks that want to maintain pressure and graveyard hate is something that is really required, I could maybe see this card, but I am not particularly hopeful.
Yeah, I'm fairly low on it, but stranger cards have seen play. Next up here, we have Scion of the Wild Cart. This is 1 green for a 3/4 elemental with trample. It also has Multitude for 6 mana. You can copy it. And as long as you control 5 or more creatures, it gets +2/+2. The floor here is pretty great.
Huge. The trample here is huge.
Yeah, definitely.
That's kind of what pushes us over the edge. Because we've seen a bunch of 3 mana 3/4s that have done well. It's a good stat line. 3 mana 4/3s, etc. But they do sometimes just get chumped forever. And then this both can get past that if you are winning because you have 5 or more creatures. This gets huge, and if the game goes late, you can cast this for Multitude and kind of just build out the board all by itself. We'll have to see whatever kind of things it's competing against, because in heavy green decks, the 3 mana slot is really, really competitive. But it's at least worth considering.
Yeah. Speaking of good trample creatures, we have Scratch's Horseman. This is 4 green for a 6/6 elemental knight. It can't be countered, it's got hexproof, and as long as you're ancient, creatures you control have trample and haste.
We have our own Carnage
Tyrant is here, yes. I think the haste here is pretty huge, though. If you think about what is the counterplay to a Carnage Tyrant, it's you have rats, you have edicts. Those both are pretty much always sorcery speed. All our rats are sorcery speed, and then our edicts like Dooming Door and the Revelation one, those are both sorceries. So being able to, if you're ancient before you cast this, which isn't unlikely, you only need 2 lands in your graveyard and then the 6 that you're casting this with, you'll be able to get in for that 6 immediately before they even really have a chance to do anything about it. And then, of course, it's still immune to a whole lot of other kinds of interaction.
As a control player, this is probably the most groan-worthy card to see in the set. I'm just
Sell the Wreckage can't save you now.
I mean, I love this I love this type of card. I think this type of card is, something we haven't seen a lot of in the format so far. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to kind of, give kind of green-based decks, a big top end, green. Put this in like green-based mid-range or something, green-black
Yeah,
or
for sure.
something similar.
Maybe in that same green-black control deck that we were talking about with the Stygian mandate. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. Whether you put this in control deck or whether you put it as the top end, kind of sideboard card as in your mid-range deck.
Turn 4, your end step, cast Dabbling Dangerously, get a treasure. Turn 5, cast this. Feels pretty good.
Well, yeah, but if you're doing that, you probably don't have Ancients, so it's a lot.
That's true,
yeah,
but
so
still a Carnage Tyrant.
Yeah, because the haste being the thing that's behind the Ancient trigger, like, really stops you kind of wanting to.
The trample's also behind there, which means that you can get chump blocked before you hit it. But, still. Alright, next up we have 2-guy Rallier. This is a 1 and a green for a 2-1 elemental. When it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 elf token. If you control 5 or more creatures, then you can put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. And then it's got Multitude for 7. This is a great card to play alongside Scion of the Wild card.
I think the Multitude is not going to come up very often at all, but having the floor of turn 2, 2/1 plus a 1/1 token, and then just if you draw it late, put a +1/+1 counter on everything, like that is quite good.
Yeah, this card is really good.
Yeah. There are a lot of good tools for green-white tokens in this set.
I've cast a lot of Dragon Fodders, and this kind of blows that card out of the water.
Yeah, the +1/+1 counter mode is just, will just kill people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But then like, okay, you're like, okay, well, I'll like, but then it's really hard to kind of stop them getting to that mode potentially because, tokens are all, unless you have sweepers. And so, yeah, basically if targeted removal is like, what most people are playing, I could see go white token deck kind of really going off.
All right. Next is
while it's I just wanted to add that the elf creature type is on the token is relevant because we have a number of things that are sort of elf tribal, and that's been played in the format before.
Yeah. All right. Next up here, we have a card that we've alluded to a couple times before. It's an Unlikely Piece. This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you mill 2 cards, and then for 1 and a green, an activated ability, return up to 2 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand. That is very strong.
Even as a baseline, but there's so many synergies in this set that work with it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of lands.
You can play this with Altenzian Hospitality. You can play this with the Recruiter. You can just play this with Self-Mill to get cards in your hand. You can play it with other just like discard effects. And a lot of cards like this tend to be fairly useless in multiple since they just give you access to an activated ability. But extra copies of this card do just let you mill a couple more cards, which is a pretty nice little extra to have. I'm pretty excited to play with this card and see what other people do with it. I think this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite as high on it as other people are, but I think that in the decks where you really do build around this, it could potentially be really strong.
Yeah, for sure. Next up here, we have Vessel of the Wild. This is 1 mana for a 1/2 elf elemental. You can tap and tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color, and as long as you're ancient, it gets +3/+1. So this is similar to the elf from Kaldheim that did a similar thing. I don't remember what it's called.
Jaspera Sentinel.
Jaspera Sentinel, thank you.
The fact that this becomes a 4/3 later in the game means I'm a lot more excited to play this. Because like you can't ignore a 4/3, and like so, playing this is kind of like the start of your tokens go wide strategy or whatever. Like it means you can start ramping really quickly, which then means you can play more tokens and play more or get enough lands, and then later on it's just like, okay, boom, just my dorky creature, which if I'm not just using it as yet another like token character go wise, I can just hit in by myself.
Notably, this is also in the format with Inspired in Karsus. So this is free Inspired triggers.
That's pretty
Yeah, that's true. There's the one that creates copies of things, but that's only really a combo card. There's some other stuff that might see play if we had more reliable.
Yeah, there was talk about the blue mythic that draws you cards.
Yeah.
Yep.
That search didn't work. Anyways, I think last thing I wanted to add with this card is that it is an elf, which is pretty relevant. I think more so on this card than the Rallier.
Mm-hmm. I don't think with the loss of Soulbinder, I'm not sure the Elves deck has a good 1-drop anymore, and I think that this fills that slot pretty nicely.
Yeah, I mean, also, how do we feel about something like this into like, you know, one of our like 2 mana, you know, mill yourself dorks? You know,
yeah, I think that's reasonable too.
Because
well, one of them's rotating out, but it is pretty nice with the Elvish Witness.
Yes. So one of them's rotating out, but like just kind of starting, kind of turboing out Ancient potentially. If that's something you want, while getting some pretty ridiculous ramp, might work out.
Yeah, these kinds of cards make me very happy. We have all this incidental graveyard hate in the set.
Yeah. All right, gonna move on to the last section here, which is multicolored, and then we got some colorless and lions at the end. We have Assemble the Mob first. Red and a white for a sorcery. Speaking of dragon fodder, create 2 1/1 soldier tokens, and if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. So if you have Revolt on, this is a 2 mana heroic reinforcements, which is pretty big.
Yeah, so I mean, like, all the green card is like that we just talked about is like, much, getting a 2/1 and a 1/1 is really good. This card, the upside, if you can consistently get Revolt, or like even just get Revolt on the right turn, it's going to deal so much damage. It's going to be absurd.
Mm-hmm.
Two 2/2s with haste plus the rest of your team gets buffed.
Yeah, like
the base rate if you have to play this. Yeah, exactly. It's not very low either. 2 mana for 2 1/1s at sorcery speed. It's not excellent, but it's like a perfectly reasonable thing to do on turn 2. And if you can follow it up with another one next turn, then it's really quite brutal.
You do also have New Divide, so you can realistically get this live with Revolt on turn 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, because like if it was just the 2 tokens that you made got like +1/+1, I would still be looking at this. And the fact that it's your whole team, like, I think sometimes you're just going to top deck this, and you're going to be like, okay, I just win now. Like, go over the edge, right? You're going to be terrified to play against this if your opponent is playing like red-white aggro. Because, basically they just have Team Pump at any time, plus an extra 4 power on the board for 2 mana. Like, imagine playing multiples of these. Ugh. In the one turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, this card's really scary, okay?
That thought makes me sad.
It's like, here we go. 2 2/2s and another 2 3/3s, and the rest of my team gets +2/+. Like that's disgusting.
I really hope this makes Feast of the Crows.
Oh yes,
more, rotate back.
Crows really needed, more reasons to play it.
Of course. Yeah, don't play this if your opponent has a Feast of the Crows live.
Bad idea.
Well, I mean, if you slap him for 4 days,
It triggers Revolt.
So true.
It's true. That's true.
Yeah.
All right, next up here we have Burning Roots. This is a card I'm excited about. This is 2 red-green for a sorcery. Search library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield, untapped, then shuffled. And it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. I mean, kill a creature, get a basic land. This is all I ever want to do. And then late in the game, I can just lava axe my opponent. I mean, sign me up.
Yeah,
I'm a bit unsure about this because we don't have a ton of typed lands. Like I guess there are the Karsus.
The Karsus ones are pretty huge for this.
MTGs. Yeah, not a ton of ways of searching for them. Although I guess you have Gate of Realms if you want to go for a rampy route.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know. I think this might end up being too slow compared to our other ramp tools. Like the going face is nice, but like if you're playing red green ramp, how often are you wanting to go face? And if you're wanting removal, there's probably better options.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's an interesting card to think about. Like, if you're wanting to do both at the same time.
For sure.
You can also do interesting things with this and things like Kaleidoscape, for example, as a way of getting extra damage
Types,
in.
yeah, for sure. Next up here, we have Collector of the Lost. This is 1 green-white for a 2/2 elemental. It's got Multitude for 4 green-white. And creature tokens you control get +1/+1 and have Vigilance. So if you Multitude this, of course, the copy is a token, so it'll get buffed. But otherwise, this is just a intangible virtue on a body, which you can certainly do worse.
Yeah, I think this will be pretty excellent. It's kind of a little annoying that like Tuga Rallia, which might
only
be
one is a token.
Yeah, only one is a token, but like there are plenty of other token makers in other colors. Like if you're playing, a white kind of create, 2 soldiers or whatever. I'm pretty sure we have that in the format.
Yeah, Warband reinforcements.
Yeah.
Yep.
Suppose while we're on the topic of green-white tokens, we should mention Ethereal Grace here. This is X green-white for an instant. It costs 3 less to cast if you control 3 or more tokens, and you make X 1/1 elf tokens.
I mean, I don't know how often the first win more clause is going to come up. And
Well,
3 tokens
it works
isn't
with
really
things
win
like
more, I don't think.
treasures.
Yeah.
It works with things like although you don't. It sort of works with treasures because you can't then use the treasures to cast this.
Yeah. I mean, clues. I guess.
I don't think 3 or more tokens is something that is impossible.
Yeah, you only need a Warband reinforcements and then one more thing. Like, I think the comparison here is March of the Multitudes, which is another, like, if you have tokens, you can make more of them.
Yeah. I like the main thing is that I think is exciting is that it's an instant.
Yeah, it also makes elves, which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
But again,
it does reward you for already. Yeah, it does reward you for already going wide, but at the same time, while that does open you up to getting shut down by a wrath, you can also wait until after your opponent casts the wrath on their turn and then replenish afterwards. So it's got some good modality.
But then you don't get the cost reduction.
Oh, you still get something.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty low on this until Feast of the Crows rotates out. But like, it's a fun. It's a fun.
So many times.
It's a fun tool. It's a fun tool.
All right. Guess we should keep going in order now. We got Ella, Rose Court Queen, who the inaugural Renegade promo for the set. This is 3 blue-red for a 2/2 with Flash and Prowess. When it enters the battlefield, you make 2 1/1 blue wizard tokens with Prowess. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets for the copy. Notably, not only instants and sorceries, you can copy an enchantment or an artifact too.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's really hard to make high-cost Prowess cards that's kind of want to go in that style of deck, but this kind of does it because you don't really need to play this in like a dedicated Prowess deck. You just can play it in any type of red-blue control shell because you play this, you flash this in at the end of the turn. You've got this and 2 wizards or with Prowess, and then you play anything else the next turn, and suddenly your entire board gets pumped, and you're swinging in for. Like 7? And that's only with 1 spell. Like, it gets, you swing in for 10 if you cast 2 spells. This kind of can be a control finisher, really. Like, you just swing the game around.
Yeah.
This is also like an incidental way of copying stuff, so you can put counters on your blue 1-mana Prowess dude from earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
that's a good point.
I mean, I would go figure with the copying. Like, what type of like do things like copy your the colors maybe don't quite work, but like copy off, drift off without having to cast the multitude cost, or like copy kind of value enchantments or removal, or it's just also having, I don't know, it's a bit awkward because you don't want to like sacrifice the wizard tokens, but then because they will help kill the opponent for you, but then sometimes that's what you want to do because you just need to survive. So yeah.
Does this have applications in Control, like not a Pro OS deck? Like you just play it on turn 5, so that all the spells you cast afterwards are just doubled. You can sacrifice all 3 of the creatures that this makes for 3 doubled spells.
Yeah, well, that's basically what I think. I don't think you put this in the Pro OS deck. I think you put it in Control deck first. And so then basically your choices are either I double 2 removal spells, or I play 2 spells and I swing at you for 10. I think you can potentially just like turn the game around really quickly. Go like if you're not under pressure. It's a really interesting card to think about.
For sure, yeah. Not really a good comparison for this card in canon Magic either. It's kind of an interesting spot. Next up, we got Ella's Agent. This is black-red for a 1/1 rogue. As long as it's attacking, it gets +2/+0 and has Death Touch. You pay 1 mana and sacrifice a creature. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. The fact that this is attacks as a 3/1, it's a sack outlet, and it can protect other things. I mean, this card's very versatile. I think we haven't really had a true, like... People have tried Aristocrats decks before, but they've never really been able to break through as, like, true Aristocrats builds. But I think this card is just, like, for a really low to the ground kind of sacrificey deck, I think is really, really good push for that kind of deck.
Yeah, I mean, we saw some black-white Aristocrats. I've definitely played some decent versions, but, like, yeah, it's kind of been... rough. It was kind of rough because like it was when there was a lot of like combo decks going around, which could kind of just ignore you. But yeah, this seems like a really interesting tool.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got other support as well for Karslav also has black red aristocrats, so there are other tools that are running around.
All right, next up here we have Fragment of Fidelity, our last, I believe, of the Spirit tribal tools. This is 4 white-blue for a 4/4 Spirit Knight. It costs 1 less to cast for each spirit you control. It's got flying, and it's got escape for 8 white-blue and exile 3 other cards. Only 3 cards for the escape is really nice, but it's a lot of mana. However, I think like we've seen a lot of things that can make a lot of spirit tokens. There's the 1 mana spell that gets you if you cast another spell. There's Flesh Offered to the Dead. There's a lot of 1 mana creatures. I think that this card could, like, if there's a spirits deck, it'll probably want to be playing like at least 1 or 2 of these.
Yeah, I think it operates on a very different axis to the spirits deck as well. Like the spirits deck is very weak to small like pyroclasms, that sort of thing, and this survives pretty much all of those. Like we have a lot of -3/-3 wraths in the format as well, which this dodges.
Yeah.
Also doesn't, like, it obviously it scales up with the more spirits you have, but it doesn't require a ton of spirits to be an efficient threat. Like even at 3 other spirits, this is an above curve creature, and if you can get 4, it's really, really good.
Sure. Next up, we have Gift of Deadwoods. This is black-green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. Then you can return a creature or land card milled this way to your hand. At the beginning of combat on each player's turn, if you're ancient, you can have it become a 5/5 elemental creature until end of turn. The floor here is a pretty nice little strategic planning type card, and then the fact that this can just become a 5/5 later on is... I think this card is going to be really, really strong if it has a home.
Yeah, this is what makes me excited to be like black-green kind of mid-range. Because you can get back your you can get a land early on if you need to kind of curve out. You can get a creature threat back, a premium 3 or 4 drop later on, or you just kind of play it and murder them because it's really hard for them to deal with like a bunch of 5/5s. Like imagine if you played multiple of these in the same game. It's like yes, I am one card off Ancients, draw land, play, hit you for 15. Because it doesn't cost mana, right? Which is I think, and also it can block. So I think both of these are really important, right? Because if it was only during your turn, it would be hard to it would be a lot more dead against aggressive strategies. While if it was, cost mana to activate, then it would be a lot worse in multiples.
Yeah.
And so, this card is pretty spicy.
This is scary, even.
Yeah.
It goes really nicely with Persistent Deadwood, which is one of the sets, or which is the Gutter Bones in the set, and its condition is you have to have 3 cards put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn. So this pretty nicely does that.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Very nice. Yeah.
Now, if I had a nickel for every black multicolored enchantment at uncommon in this set that had an enter the battlefield effect that let me get 1 card from 3 cards and put the rest into my graveyard, I would have 2 nickels. Grave Pact Wisdom is 1 blue-black for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Whenever you cast a spell from your graveyard, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Any fans of Burning Vengeance?
I mean, gaining you 2 life is a big upgrade on Burning Vengeance, but it can only be a face. But then it has value. I'm unsure on this card. It's interesting. It's interesting.
I don't think you need to storm off with graveyard spells for this to work. Like the 2 life gain helps you stabilize its value. I think you'd be happy with just casting a single escape card per turn or something. There's a combo of this. If you have this out and Feast of the Crows, then you can just infinitely cast Persistent Deadwood for as much black mana as you have. Drain your opponent for 2 every single time. It dies to the Feast of the Crows. Cast it again.
That's pretty funny.
Probably a bit janky, but if you like that kind of thing.
Notably, it does only trigger on cast, so it doesn't work with a lot
of
the recursive threats. But that one it does work with.
Yeah, I mean, how do we think about Northlands Revenant or something just going
or
for
unkillable
really,
or unkillable henchman?
Yeah, how do we feel about just going for kind of lots of recursive elements, cheap for cheap. Because while you don't have to storm off, you certainly can. I don't know. The life gain here is what makes this card interesting. Otherwise, I'd be a lot lower on it.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Here, next we have probably the single card I'm the most excited about from this set. It's the Herald of the Wild Court. This is 2 green-white for a 4/2 legendary elf druid. You can't cast non-creature spells, but whenever you cast a creature spell, copy it. This is all I want to do. I just want to play stupid gimmicks like this.
I'm so glad this has 2 toughness.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is very, very swingy, very polarizing. If you can untap with this card, it's very brutal for your opponent, but if they just shock it, it's really brutal for you.
Yeah.
Notably, if you play this with mana and then cast a spell, your opponent doesn't have a window to dodge you getting at least 1 spell copy.
That's true.
This works quite nicely with dorks. You play this on turn 4, and then you at least get a copy of another dork or something. It's very play it and must kill. If you can't answer it immediately, you're probably not looking good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple cards later. You see 2-guy Corpse Maker works great with this. Just I'm excited to try a 3 or 4 color, just creatures with value ETBs kind of deck. I don't know. Probably won't be good, but this is a card I'm excited to build around.
I mean, if you ever untap with this and cast a 5-drop, I think you win that game. Which, I think that's just something we have to consider because, how many other 4-drops do we have that just if you don't kill them, you just immediately win?
Merciless Shield Breaker.
Casting I mean, like casting the persist creature that makes a 5/5 if you didn't cast it is just the persist one, which I can't remember the name. Is brutal with this.
Yeah, notably, like it works really nice with your token strategies. You know, if you if you control 5 or more creatures, like it's pretty easily enables those.
You play this, and then you play 2 Aurelias.
Oh yeah, there's the money. There's the money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, cool. Have my like board of like, 6/6s go. Anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, we have In Search of Peace. This is 1 white blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell, exile up to 1 other target permanent you control. Return it to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of the next end step. This is, of course, a reference to the famous the famous card Peace in Our Time from Myriad and from Agonis Cube. Downsides it has over that: it's 2 colors, it costs more mana, it slow flickers, and it can only hit things you control. That's a lot of restrictions, but with that said, Peace in Our Time is kind of broken. So I think that a nerfed version of it like this could still be pretty interesting to try and build with.
Yeah, I keep trying to make like Flicker work, and I just don't think we quite have the tools for it yet. But like, maybe we've got some spicy ETBs in this format.
I mean, yeah, this turns any 1 mana instant into like blank
We do
removal
know we
spell.
have the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, if you're not playing to the board, do they care about the removal spell? I think you really need to have the like value engines to make this actually worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Notably, this is cast a spell. Like it's not like instant sorcery, so you're not jumping through multiple hoops. So it's like this kind of just triggers off everything, which is pretty exciting.
All right. Next up, we have another card that I'm pretty interested to try, Lichbane Ward Wielder. This is red and a white for a 2/2 human cleric rogue with flash. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Copy target activated or triggered ability from a non-land source. You may choose new targets for the copy. Or you can choose new targets for target spell or ability. This is a very versatile and interesting card that's pretty unique for something red-white does. But I think the thing that weirdly makes me most interested in this is the rogue subtype there, because it means this slots really well into Heist of the Century decks if you want to try and build with that. But I think even beyond that, just being able to have this 2-mana 2/2 flash creature that can either get you value out of some incidental activated ability or just swerve a spell to be kind of a 2-for-1, this card's got a lot of potential.
This is a card I'm very interested in. I'm not. Its playability will really depend on the metagame and how it shakes out. Certainly, it's a sideboard option against certain matchups. Copying things like your opponent's planeswalker abilities, for example, are very strong.
Oh yeah.
But even with a new divide, that's not Land Source, never mind. Specifically for this, probably. There's a lot of. This has a lot of interesting interactions, and I could very easily see it being good in ways that I can't easily anticipate. Exciting.
All right. We got.
Does this go infinite with the Herald of the Wild Court?
No, whenever you cast a creature spell, tokens aren't cast, I think.
Oh, okay. So if it enters the battlefield and then copies it, it's not a spell anymore. So it doesn't. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, okay. It was good to check. It was good to check.
No.
All right, don't build that deck, people.
Kind of be an awkward time to realize we had an infinite interaction in this set during the review of the set.
Yeah. You know what, though? If you're like a 4-color deck, you could do some really goofy win more stuff with this card and copying an ETB from a creature. Just get like 4 of them or whatever. Just go absolutely nuts. Probably not that good, though. Anyways, we got Manira the Wayward next. 2 white blue for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. I believe our first planeswalker of the set here. Her +1 is exile up to 1 target enchantment or creature returned to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next upkeep. -2, exile target creature until target non-land permanent you control leaves the battlefield. And -4, you can put a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. This card does a lot of things. It protects itself on a +1 since it resets something summoning sickness. The -2 being able to exile any non-land permanent and still have 1 loyalty left over. And then the -4 just being able to save on mana a little bit. Probably not going to come up that often, but I mean when it comes up, it's going to be pretty useful. I think that this card definitely has a lot of potential, especially in the same sort of decks that care about flickering as In Search of Peace. But even outside of that, I could see this card just being good in a control deck.
Yeah, I'm not super interested in the -2, although there are, with open deck lists in GPs, if you already know your opponent doesn't have much removal, they're very creature-based, then it could become a better option. But the +1 just, giving something eternally summoning sickness, and then you can also build around it by retriggering your ETBs. The +1 seems really sweet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Yep, and if again with open deck lists, if you know your opponent's soft to say Oblivion Ring effects, and you have things like existing Oblivion Ring effects, it's just that your opponent can't effectively answer already.
Yeah.
Then this just kind of compounds them.
Just throw it underneath a treasure token or something. Next up, we have Star Blessed Trance. 2 blue-red for an enchantment. As long as it's your turn, instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard have escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus discard a land card. So I believe the last card we have that's really great synergy with what was the card called? The Life from the Loam. An Unlikely Piece. I mean, you can just it lets you just cast your instant sorceries over and over and over again by just recurring the same lands that you discard, because obviously escape doesn't exile the card, so it's better than giving it flashback if you keep on having lands to feed it. I think that this can be a pretty potent engine, though it's a little bit clunky for being a 4-mana enchantment that doesn't do anything on its own.
Just plus Conjure Forth, you could just infinitely cast Conjure Forth from your graveyard for 1 mana. Everything gets you 2 spirit tokens.
Yeah, not bad at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if this quite has the legs it needs, but it's certainly a very scary card. There's a lot of potential to, do a lot of things, and even just a sort of a 1 or 2 of in sort of spell heavier decks can sort of provides a nice late game sort of out to your deck.
Yeah, for sure. Gonna keep on moving here. We only got a couple left here. We got 2-guy Corpse Maker next. 2 black-green for a 3/2 elemental rogue with multitude for 7. It's got trample, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. Longtime players may recognize this as a reference to Throat Cutter. I think this card will have similar application to that card. It's just a great little mid-range tool. Being able to cast this for 7 in the late game and be essentially a 4 for 1 is pretty great. It's also a rogue if you want to play this with Heist of the Century for some reason.
Yeah, I played me a lot of Throat Cutters back in the day. This card is sweet. It's everything I want to do in green-black, sort of rampy or control. I think that green-black is sort of exactly the color combination that might even be able to multitude it into the late game, at which point it's just great.
Yeah.
But even playing it on curve is just an excellent option, and yeah, big fan.
Yeah, I don't think there's that much else to say about this card. It's just great, and I'm excited to cast it. Next up here's our other black-green card. We have Vibrant Vengeance. 3 black-green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn, and whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. Mirari's Wake, that's a board wipe. I'm sold.
I think that the board wipe on this is inconsistent enough that I wouldn't rely on it.
Yeah,
but
sure.
it's like there are decks that will certainly want the mana doubling effect. You can get this with Approaching Greatness. There's a whole bunch of really sweet things that this can do, and I think that mid-range decks will appreciate the mana doubling and the -X mode. So yeah.
I'm a bit unsure about this with Approaching Greatness, because I think if you're running this, you really want to be getting it out earlier than turn 5, so you probably want to be going alongside some Explore stuff. But maybe as a one-of in Approaching Greatness, I could see it.
Yeah.
letting you like putting in a deck full of coalesce stuff so that all your coalesce stuff is castable really cheap. Yeah, a lot of options.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mhm.
It's just a really neat card. I'm really big fan of this design. Next up here we have
Oh, well,
Xerox.
the Explore with Coalesce, Flourish in Calamity
yeah.
or something. That seems really nice with this.
Perfect. Yeah, that works out great.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. All right.
You cast Orvis right off of this.
Yeah. Xerox Chronic Mercenary is 2 black, green, blue for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. +2, surveil 1, then draw a card. -3, choose a non-land, non-Xerox permanent. Choose a non-land, non-Xerox card name, exile all permanents with that name. And -8, you get an emblem with untap all lands you control during each opponent's untap step. You may cast spells as though they had flash, and at the beginning of each opponent's draw step, draw a card. So this is just the classic template for planeswalkers. You've got the plus to draw cards, the minus to removal, and the ultimate to win the game. But I think the big thing here is this card goes up to a lot of loyalty. It can answer any permanent type. And I think this card just... It feels like a great kind of version of this genre of planeswalker that I think if you're in these colors or even like 2 of these colors, it can be worth splashing. I think if you're a deck that wants a 5-mana planeswalker, it's hard to kind of get better than Xerox, at least to me.
Yeah. It's certainly really flexible. I think the big thing will just be the mana cost, right?
Yeah,
Can you play these colors? Because like
we're gonna get to the mana base soon. This set does have a lot of really good mana.
Yeah. So basically, can you play? Can you play these colors easily? Are you playing these colors already? And then I guess because what other planeswalkers do we have that are kind of hitting the same slot here? Like
Loze's rotating out. There's not a ton else, I don't think.
Hugo is the big one.
Yes.
Hugo and whatever you call it, Asahai as well.
Asahai is another three color one.
Notably, the -3 lets you hit multitude stuff. In case that comes up. Probably not a lot,
but not just generic tokens. Yeah. I think overall, I'm not sure Xerox has a home right now. But if there is a more reactive Sultai control or a Sultai control deck, whether it's reactive or proactive, this will probably be at least a couple of.
Right.
Yeah, and it does have a ton of loyalty. Like you +2, 7 loyalty. Yeah, ain't going anywhere.
All right, our last non-land card here we have is Unknowable Starspawn. This is 5 generic mana for a 5/4 horror. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent chooses 2. Either you gain 4 life and that player loses 4 life, that player sacrifices a creature, or that opponent discards a card.
Yeah, this card's really scary.
It's weird, but it's pretty strong.
Yeah. So obviously, we have to be careful because Punisher effects always read more powerful than they actually play. But this is a, very well statted colorless threat with immediate value. So, like, this shouldn't be underestimated. It's gonna depend on, do the other 5 mana kind of mid-range threats in the same color pushed out, and then can you potentially do something like flickering this or something that allows you to really kind of push the ETB over the edge.
I think to consider with this being a Punisher is that they're still getting 2 out of 3 no matter what. So while they'll be able to stop themselves from getting hit by whatever's worst for them, there's a good chance one of the other 2 modes is going to be pretty bad still.
Yeah. Though notably the way it's worded, the opponent can say pick the discard a card mode even if they don't have a card in hand.
Or sack mode,
which I know
creatures.
Which I know some of the black demons kind of.
Right, but if they have both no cards in hands and no creatures, I think that you're in a pretty good spot.
That's true.
With your 5 mana, we're 5 mana 5/4 anyway.
True.
Yeah.
I think this card's good. And just being colorless, is spooky. So we'll see how it goes.
Sure.
I also think that having it in the format is a good thing because there might be other mid-range decks that are lacking this point in the curve, and it lets you fill that slot.
Definitely. And last up, we have our lands here. We have 2 cycles and then 2 gold lands, basically. We're going to start with the dormant lands. These are a little bit like Horizon Canopy and Friends. You can pay 1 life to add 1 mana of either color. You can pay 1 and tap and sacrifice it to draw a card, only if you control 5 or more lands. There are a full 10 of these.
Yeah. I mean, notably, there's already a lot of things in the set that kind of cost life in black, so just be careful about playing too many of these.
I think something like a red-white deck is where these lands are really going to shine.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like, if people playing a lot of these, I could see aggro kind of gaining a bit more legs, right? To just kind of punish this. But I think it's really good texture to have in the set, and having all 10 is a lot.
Yeah. You want to know what these are great with?
And
it's an unlikely piece.
Catch up every turn.
No. You know what it's great with? It's great with the black card that cares about life loss.
Oh yeah,
there's a couple of cards that pay you off for losing life, and having a full cycle of these lands lets you do that actually really reliably.
Yeah, Reinstated Repo. This is kind of terrifying, especially if your opponent's playing one of them too. And just like, oh no, wait, no, Reinstated Repo doesn't.
It's only your opponent losing life. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah. Anyway, still, it's like
I'd just go with the Gariv set cards where they track with players losing life 3 or more times in a turn. Like you only need to play a mana base, and those things are all live.
Were any of those good?
Well, that's another question. But...
There are a couple that were borderline that this might help push over.
All right, other land cycle we'll move on to now is the Waking lands. These are man lands, basically. They come in tapped. They can produce either enemy colors. They're all enemies for this one. And you can pay 3 mana, and they'll become a creature, in addition to their other types. And they all have extra little effects there.
Yeah, they all have deals combat damage triggers, or are they all different triggers?
They're all they're different triggers.
Let's really quickly go through kind of which ones do we think are going to be most playable and exciting. They're all reasonably good, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so Waking Bog, this one animates for 3, becomes a 2/1. When it hits an opponent, you get to return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. The Boneyard is white-black. For 5 mana, it becomes a 4/4, and when it dies, if it's a creature, you make 2 1/1 spirits. The Crag animates for 4, it becomes a 2/2, and it gets Battle Cry, basically. And the Glen animates for 6, becomes a 5/5. When it deals combat damage to a player, untap each land you control.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I'm
the blue-red draws cards.
Yes. And the blue-red is a the blue-red,
Waking Vista animates has for 3, becomes a 3/2, and it's an Ophidian.
Yeah, I mean, Waking Crag is a really nice pickup for if we have the Revolt kind of tokens deck. Just because what else do you want to do once you're at 5 mana? It's nothing. I want to buff my board as much and kill my opponent, and it's this does exactly that. These come in tapped. So obviously playing a tap land in an aggressive strategy though is a cost. So we'll have to see how those kind of balance against each other.
Notably, the set has a number of land animation, and since these are static abilities, if you animate these lands without activating their own ability, then they still gain the abilities.
True. And
I think the one I like most here actually is the Boneyard, just because I think that it plays really nicely in sort of defensive decks and has a lot of power and toughness. With this combined with the fact that it's not actually a combat damage trigger means you can just sort of leave this up as an intimidating blocker. And then play other effects if your opponent doesn't attack.
Yeah. Notably, while the spirits are flying, it itself is not flying. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on what the threats are.
Also, being man-led, it's easy for your opponent to forget that they exist.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We got 2 last lands to talk about here. Gilded Court taps for colorless, and then you can tap to choose a basic land type. It gains that type. And this lasts indefinitely.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a evolving wilds that doesn't fill your graveyard, but then you can also just tap it for colorless.
And you
then
can get multiple types.
Yeah, I mean that's really slow. I'm not sure how often that'll happen.
Good with burning roots.
Yeah, sure.
It is pretty dependent on having it early. It's not the greatest top deck.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, the top deck, it's if you don't need the color, right? So you can immediately tap it for mana, or it's an evolving wild, and evolving wild sees plenty of play. I don't know. I think this card's really good.
Also, late game, you usually won't need the extra color.
Yeah.
So just having an untapped land is like, yeah. You'll have extra mana, you don't mind having this tapped. So I think that this is, I think that there are decks that will play this. It's decent with sort of the domain-like stuff in red-green and burning roots or whatever you can build up towards.
And there's also a bunch of black cards that care about you casting a number of colors of mana on spells, so that might be interested in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we just take like evolving wilds that can tap for C immediately. Like, if you want to, that's just really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. Yeah, I mean, maybe you don't play a full play set of these if you are like, if you can't use the C color, if you can't use the colors well. But yeah, I mean, any 2-color decks, I think this is really nice.
And our last one, speaking of evolving wilds here, this is the big one. This is New Divide. As it enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 life. If you don't, it comes into play tapped. And you can tap and sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield untapped, then shuffle. This is, I mean, this is a staple.
Revolt. Yeah,
it
this
enables
card
Revolt,
is...
sure, but I mean, it's just...
This card is absolutely, I would say like absurd, but it is an utter staple. This will be one of the most played lands in the format for quite a long time, I suspect.
Yeah, for as long as this set's going to be legal, people are going to be playing New Divide, probably as 4-ofs in a lot of decks.
Yes, one of the things I really like about this card is that while obviously it's very good in multicolored decks, there's a cap on it in that it limits the number of non-basics you can really play. And so in actual 5-color decks, I don't think that this is necessarily where you want to be.
It's only like a 2 or 3
but
color
just
deck,
for
so
2
this really shines.
Yeah, exactly. Which is exactly what I wanted to see out of a land like this. And I think it will play really well. It'll be interesting to see whether different decks want Luxurious Estate, this, or both. Lots of interesting decisions, and I think it'll, just good.
Yeah, that's a good note to end the review on.
Yep. Reinstated Reaper's stocks keep going up.
Oh yeah, lots of instant ways for it to get counters. Yeah, I mean,
but
I think that's gonna do it for the Blood Lake River set review. There's lots of great tools we didn't mention. If you have any, feel free to give those a shot and prove why we were wrong by not including them here. I mean, I think we're all really excited about this set. There's lots of great cards, lots of great additions to the format, new decks, old decks, all gonna really benefit from this set, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
It seems to be a really exciting inclusion. Lots and lots of interesting tools.
All right, thanks for watching, and I guess we'll see you in leagues and in GPs.
Excellent.
Sweet.